AP, Associated Press reports a sharp rise in Connecticut inmates, including convicted killers who have had their prison sentences reduced by the relatively obscure Board of Pardons and Paroles. Governor Lamont last week replaced the chair of that board, Reverend Carlton Giles, after the former Norwalk police officer acknowledged unilaterally instituting a policy that resulted in sentence commutations that included 44 convicted murderers. Yeah, that's what I said, 44. Reggie Jackson's number, 44 who had an average of 15 years cut off their sentence. So after the governor decides he's going to replace this person with somebody else, what's the Senate do yesterday? They affirm the renomination of the guy back to the same position. Joining us now on the hotline is one of the good guys. I say that because he's one of the few people up there really looking out for you and me, representing us the way we want to be represented, and that is State Senator Rob Sampson. Rob, welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning, Pastor Will. Great to join you this morning. Thanks so much.
Well, I wish it was on other topics, but what the heck is going on up there? This guy, I mean, I don't know if I pronounced it right, Carlton Giles, Reverend Giles, his 44 murderers have their sentence commuted. I mean, what the heck? I mean, how is that fair to the people they murdered? How is it fair to the families of the people who had people murdered? How does that make any sense at all? And who is this guy that just put in this policy, this unilateral policy? What's going on, Rob?
Right. I mean, you've taken a lot of the words right out of my mouth. I mean, it's extremely frustrating, and it is just the latest thing in a long line of policy decisions and votes that have been taken in the Connecticut legislature that really, illustrate that the Democrats, they do not care about law and order in this state any longer. No. I think it started under Governor Malloy when they began the risk reduction credit program, which was effectively giving people good time credits to let out of prison early. And then a whole series of policies, the Second Chance Society, policies that made it more difficult for our local police to engage in their day-to-day work of stopping crime, limiting sentences, changing the way our courts operate. And this is just the latest thing, which is that our Board of Pardons and Paroles has adopted a policy effectively of commuting sentences. And I mean, huge chunks of time being taken off of sentences for people who have committed the worst of all crimes in Connecticut. These are not car thieves. I don't even know if they put those in jail anymore. Clearly, based on recent events, they don't seem to. These are people that have committed multiple homicides who are serving 60, 70, 80-year sentences. People that shouldn't be let out ever. I mean, effectively, based on their age and the time that they were sentenced to. And that was the original agreement. And I would point that out. It is an agreement. You know, when there's a court case and you've got all the people involved, you've got the person himself, the perpetrator, and you've got the attorneys, the judge, you got the victim's family all involved. A lot of times it ends up being a negotiated agreement or a sentence handed down by a court. Nothing should undermine that, and certainly nothing should undermine a plea deal, which is effectively a contract between all of the parties. Imagine being, the family of a victim of one of these crimes and having to worry that the person that was sentenced for the murder of your family member is going to get out of prison, like serving half the time or less than what they were sentenced to.
Well, you're right. I mean, it's Democrats that do this stuff. Now, I know what the good Reverend will say to us. He'll say, "Well, everybody deserves a second chance. Don't you believe in redemption?" I absolutely do believe in redemption. I believe that a murderer can go to heaven. I believe that if they get their hearts right with Jesus before they die. However, there are certain crimes that you commit. There are severe consequences, and particularly in the murder case. And I'll take you back to the two scum who should not be alive today, who murdered William Pettit's family. They were sitting on death row awaiting execution. They both should have been executed. And then we went and changed and said, "Oh, no, you can't do that. We're not going to have death penalty anymore in Connecticut." Daniel P. Malloy said, "Oh, this will be prospective. This won't be retrospective. Everybody, the 11 scum that are on death row will stay there." That's not going to stop that. Of course, what happened as soon as that law passed, they said, "Oh, it's unconstitutional. You can't have those guys on death row." So they get to live the rest of their lives after brutal, heinous, violent murder of a grown woman and teenage girls. So I don't even care if the family of the victim says we want them set free. I don't even care, because the only correct justice when you take someone else's life in a premeditated, particularly heinously violent way, I think is the death penalty. But if we don't have that, then you stay the rest of your days in jail where you can think about what you did. So this is ridiculous. And I don't know who's running the show up there with you guys, the Senate, right? So Lamont does the right thing. He pulls this guy out. He puts in, I don't even know who this is, Jennifer Medina Zaccanini. Is that her name?
Right. Yep.
And what do you know about her?
I don't know much about her other than that she's another member of the Board of Pardons and Paroles, and just not the current chairman. Yeah. And really, that's all they've done is rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic here. You know what I'm saying? Because it's the entire commission that voted for these commutations, and effectively all that's happened is that the governor, recognizing that this is a very large political problem, decided that he was going to remove the chairman as chairman. And the legislature voted yesterday to reconfirm Mr. Giles back to his role on the Board of Pardons and Paroles, not as chairman, but back as a member. And I just don't see that that's going to change the direction, especially when you have the Democrats standing up on the floor of the Senate defending his position and his policy of these huge commutations. And Pastor, well, I can't tell you just how much, talking to you about the Cheshire incident and the reversal of the death penalty and all that business in Connecticut. It was one of the most frustrating periods in time that I ever served in the legislature. I was there. I was one of the people fighting against the repeal of the death penalty. I made the argument on the floor that there was no way you could make this prospective. Many of us got up and said that it was a game that they were playing with us, that they were just trying to get the votes by suggesting that the Cheshire murderers would still get the death penalty when we all knew that they wouldn't, even the people that voted for it. It was a disgrace.
Anybody with any legal understanding at all knew that. It was just like when they did civil unions. When they approved civil unions, I said within a year, somebody's going to say this is unconstitutional. And guess what happened? We have gay marriage based on one vote of one Supreme Court judge in Connecticut. Now, the same thing is true with this death penalty thing. Everybody knew that this is going to go, it has to be retroactive. It can't be prospective. It has to be retrospective, because it's not fair to not have a death penalty, except for these 11 guys you don't have a death penalty. So the whole thing was a mess to begin with. And Malloy knew every bit of the way that that's the way this was going to go. My question is, doesn't the governor have the right? Don't people on these boards serve at the goodwill and pleasure of the governor? Doesn't the governor have a right to take people on and off boards or on or off commissionerships? Isn't that the governor's prerogative?
Absolutely. I believe the members of the Board of Pardons and Paroles are actually appointed by the governor, and they are confirmed by the legislature. So they go through the same kind of process that judges do. Hey, speaking of which, they seem to have a lot more power than judges based on recent events.
I mean,
a judge has got to follow what the statute says as far as the sentencing and the time that needs to be allotted for some folks, and respect the will of the jury and everything else that goes on in a court case. Plea deal that's negotiated between the families and the prosecution and all that stuff. And here you go. You got these lay people, effectively, not even lawyers, who are appointed by the governor, who can undermine and undo, an important sentence that was handed down many, many years ago based on the facts on the time. And the left would argue that, times have changed, and, that doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at all.
On a contract. You do not upend the lives of the victims' families years after these events occurred.
I mean, when it says, and I don't know, in the AP story, it says, it mentions Reverend Giles by name and says that the former Norwalk police officer acknowledged unilaterally instituting a policy that resulted in these commutations. Now, was that him and him alone? Was that the whole board that approved this thing? How did this policy release 44 convicted murderers? How did that happen?
That's a good question, because no one really understands exactly how the policy came to be. Apparently, there was a move by the executive branch to encourage the adoption of a new commutation policy. But effectively, it looks like they just left it up to them to decide what that policy is. and that should not happen. Most
the entire board. How many on the board? Do you know, Rob? How many on the board?
There are three.
The whole board should be replaced. It all should be dismissed summarily and replaced with people who have common sense and have a sense of justice and fairness. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Now, how did this? Hopefully, dear God, this vote fell along party lines. Actually, Joan Hartley, who I think is one of the good Democrats, and Kathy Austin also joined you guys in opposition. It says to this reappointment of Carlton Giles. Everybody, all the now arrested Democrats voted for. And what's up with this Gary Winfield guy? Has he ever met a criminal he didn't like?
Yeah,
that's a tough question. I can't ask you to comment on fellow senators. Let me just say, in my opinion, Gary Winfield has never met a criminal he didn't like.
Yeah, I would just say, generally speaking, not to single out Senator Winfield, but the Democrats in general, and there are exceptions. And I think that you mentioned the two folks that voted with Republicans yesterday in opposition. Whether they did it for political reasons or they're feeling the pressure back home, or whether they think it was the right thing to do, that's a whole separate conversation. But the majority of the Democrats, I think that they look at this entire issue of criminal justice in Connecticut as a social justice issue. Yep. It is not really about crime and punishment, the rule of law, maintaining a civil society, protecting the safety of Connecticut residents. That's what we should be doing. It should be the number one paramount thing that the state government does. Instead, the state government's involved in all kinds of other things. Faction building and redistributing wealth and interfering with commerce. What they ought to be doing is focusing on making sure that we live in a safe and prosperous, place where people have the opportunity to pursue happiness, just like our founding documents say.
There's a thought. There's
but
a concept.
They're off the reservation. They're more about promoting social justice and righting the wrongs of the past by creating new wrongs and new discrimination today. And this is just the latest in a long line of things that they've done to really break our criminal justice system. It's a travesty, and we have to keep the pressure on. People need to realize what's going on and that this can't continue.
People need to call their state senator and express how unhappy they are about how this board is functioning and recommend that the entire board, all three of them, summarily dismissed and new justice-minded people replace them. Now, I haven't called out Gary Winfield. You know what? You're welcome to come on the show, Senator. Come on next week. If anybody's listening, any upset Democrat, get a hold of Winfield. Tell him invite him on the show next week, because this is ridiculous. This is not how to manage the. We have upticks in crime across the country. Murders in our major cities here in Connecticut, and the last thing you want to do is send a message that, well, even if you commit a murder, if you get 30 years, you're only going to serve half of it, or if you get 40, no, murders. This should be life without parole. I mean, listen. I understand people can change. I get it. I know people can change. I know Chuck Colson was a famous, white collar criminal from the White House Watergate. He changed, started a brand new ministry, been saving people for 50 years. Prison fellowship. I understand people can change. But this isn't about people changing. They should feel remorseful for taking someone else's life. That ought to happen. And that's fine. And we celebrate their change. But it doesn't mean that they get excused from consequence when they've killed someone. And it's against the legal system. It's against fairness to the victims, fairness to their families. It's just wrong on so many counts. I'm okay. Let me ask you something else. Just gosh. Let me ask you something else.
I was just going to throw you an amen because you said that so well. I have people in my district who are scared. I mean, I have elderly people that are concerned about going to put gas in their car or go to the ATM because they feel like they live in a lawless society. Yeah. It's madness. There's no reason why that should happen in the Connecticut that you and I grew up in.
Well, and then we're going to wonder why more people are carrying guns, and then people are going to take protection seriously, and we're going to start seeing shootings because people are getting accosted in parking lots and carjacked. You know what? I feel like, you have a right to protect yourself. And you don't know when someone attacks you. You don't know what their intention is. You don't know if they care about whether they kill you or not kill you or maim you. Woman in New York City thrown down on the concrete sidewalk, paralyzed now. I mean, you can't predict the behavior of a criminal. What you can do is you can take care of your behavior, and you need to protect yourself. Now, let me ask you another question here. I'm sorry, I'm so upset about this. Okay.
I don't blame you.
Pandemic.
And the Democrats will claim that that crime is down. That's one of the arguments they made yesterday.
Fantasy.
That crime is not down. The prosecution of crime is down.
And crime is not down because you're letting criminals out either.
Gosh. They're trying to use these statistics to their benefit. Everyone can see what's actually going on. I'm sorry, I know you want to change that.
No, I want to get you back on because this early voting thing is really frosting my cookies. And knowing now that it's going to cost anywhere from $6 to $9 million of taxpayer money to fund the early voting is a whole other issue. But what I want to talk about is this. Okay, pandemic, I get it. Hey, I worked through the whole pandemic. I didn't get a bonus. I didn't stop working for one day during the pandemic. I was in the office. I was visiting people. I was fighting with nurses to go see people in the hospital who had COVID, who were dying. I mean, I lived through it just like everybody else. This is ridiculous. 36,000 state employees are getting a $49 million settlement or a raise or a bonus or whatever heck you want to call it. They're still here. They didn't die. They didn't get sick. They didn't lose anything. They're still here. And what, 3 people voted against this, and you were one of them? What the heck?
Yeah, I'm very disappointed that we couldn't get more Republicans to speak out and vote against that package. And for the reasons that you said, I mean, but the biggest thing for me, Pastor Will, is simply that, the people that didn't have to worry about their jobs being there or their ability to, earn a paycheck and pay for food during the pandemic were people that work for the state. The people in the private sector, many of them lost their businesses. They lost their jobs. People lost their jobs because they wouldn't get a vaccine. I mean, they lost their jobs because their industry was shut down because the governor just arbitrarily decided that certain people are essential and other people are not essential. And I'll remind your listeners, I mean, ridiculous reasons, like the liquor store is open, but, Susie's dress shop, who gets customers just, 1 or 2 at a time throughout the day and has, very little interaction that might have spread COVID. They have to be closed because they're not essential. But the liquor store's open, the Target's open. And those are the people that were impacted and affected by this. And furthermore, just on a more basic level, this is not the role of government. The role of government is to use tax money if they must take it for the purpose of running the state or federal government. It's not for the purpose of redistributing to whoever they feel is appropriate on any given day. I hate these programs. They are used for nothing but
they're just candy. They're just candy for unions. This is a union filler. That's all this is. It's ridiculous. Rob, listen, we're out of time. Can I get you to come back next week? I want to talk more about this. I want to talk about this early voting thing. I want to talk about how unreliable now we find out that our voting machines are. Is it possible? Can I get you to come back next week?
I would love to talk about it. Yes, you can have me for sure.
All right, let's tentatively say this time next Thursday. How about that? I'll check with Adam. We'll find out. All right?
Sounds great. Very good.
Right, Rob Sampson, one of the good guys. Keep up the good work, Rob. We appreciate what you do to serve us. Thank you.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Pastor Will.
Okay. All right. We'll be back after the news, and then I'm going to tell you the story about who wants to put a border wall up. Shocking.